Myles Garrett's 100 miles per hour traffic stop is the kind of short, sharp incident that immediately registers as both a legal matter and a PR problem. And for a player of his stature, it becomes a multi-layered headache for the team, the fan base, and Garrett himself. The raw facts are simple. Pulled over after the Browns returned from their preseason trip, cited for going 100 in a 60 zone, ticket payable without court, relatively small face value, $250. But the context turns a routine speeding citation into something more consequential. Garrett's history of similar infractions, the timing right after a game, his superstar status and massive contract, and the optics of repeating behavior that other team members, notably a rookie QB, have also faced recently. All of that expands the story from a simple traffic ticket into a broader discussion about accountability, risk management, and reputation. Legally, the immediate penalties are minor and unlikely to threaten Garrett's ability to play. Speeding tickets of this sort typically carry fines and points on a driver's record. Repeat offenses can drive insurance premiums up and, in some jurisdictions, lead to license suspension thresholds. From a criminal law perspective, there's usually nothing here unless there were aggravating factors: reckless driving, DUI, an accident. So the league's legal exposure is low. Where material consequences emerge is squarely in the team's internal discipline framework, in the court of public opinion, and in potential indirect costs: higher insurance, increased scrutiny during any future incidents, and erosion of goodwill built up with fans and sponsors. The pattern element is what matters most. This is Garrett's 8th speeding citation in Cleveland since being drafted in 2017, and he once flipped his Porsche in 2022 while reportedly speeding. Patterns invite inferences. Is this a case of poor judgment, a recurring risk tolerance problem, or something deeper: stress, distraction, poor impulse control? When one of the league's highest-paid non-quarterbacks repeatedly runs afoul of traffic laws, it's harder for the organization to treat each event as an isolated mistake. Repetition raises the heat on leadership to do more than accept a fine and move on. From a team management standpoint, the Browns have several priorities. First, consistency. How did the organization handle recent speeding tickets for Shedeur Sanders? If Garrett is treated differently because of his status, that will spark locker room and fan resentment. If Garrett is disciplined similarly to other players, the team demonstrates fairness. Second, optics. Garrett is a face of the franchise under a massive contract and recently extended. The Browns have invested enormous resources in him. Anything that casts doubt on his judgment gets magnified. Third, risk mitigation. Repeated behavioral flags can translate into on-field disruption, suspensions, distractions, or off-field legal entanglements that take personnel and PR resources to manage. Possible organizational responses span a spectrum. The minimal route is an internal admonition and acknowledgement that the ticket was paid. The Browns can treat it as a private personnel matter. A stronger intermediate step would be a public reminder of team conduct standards, coupled with mandated corrective actions: defensive line icon counseling, a defensive driving course, or a requirement to meet with team leadership. The heaviest approach would include fines, suspension from team activities, or conditional penalties tied to future conduct. In practice, most teams opt for a mix: internal discipline and proactive remediation, while avoiding heavy public penalties unless the incident triggers a violation of league policy or involves criminal behavior. Given Garrett's value, teams usually try to correct behavior without creating a rift, but public trust and internal morale make accountability essential. There's also the sponsorship and public relations angle. Garrett's off-field behavior is a factor for partners. Brands typically want athletes who embody responsibility and positive influence. Repeated legal brush-ups complicate those relationships. For the Browns, the immediate PR task is to localize the story. Stress that Garrett is contrite, that the matter has been addressed, and that player safety and legal compliance are top priorities. The team should avoid overreaction that feeds the narrative, but it also must show it isn't dismissive. A short, factual team statement acknowledging awareness and promising to handle it internally would be the minimal professional response. From Garrett's perspective, pragmatic steps make sense. Public contrition if appropriate, a private commitment to change, and concrete corrective actions, defensive driving class, limits on late-night solo travel after away games, or using team transportation, will reduce the odds of repeat headlines. Being proactive, for example, announcing he'll participate in a safe driving program or donate a portion of future fines to a traffic safety nonprofit, can convert a negative into a reputational repair opportunity. Athletes recover fast from incidents when they pair accountability with clear behavior change. This incident also connects to the broader cultural and operational issues teams face. Preseason travel patterns, fatigue, and schedule density can contribute to poor driving decisions. Teams can proactively reduce these risks by controlling end-of-night logistics, charters, team shuttles, enforcing curfews, and offering education. It's standard risk management. Reduce the opportunities for players to make regrettable choices, and the organization minimizes downstream exposures. Finally, consider the fan and locker room impact. Fans are forgiving of human errors, but less forgiving of repeated, avoidable lapses by high-paid stars. Teammates may privately resent behavior that attracts negative media attention or diverts organizational attention. Leadership, from coaches to the front office, will want to nudge Garrett back toward risk-averse choices because the team's focus must remain on winning, not damage control. In short, the ticket itself is minor. The implications are not. Garrett's citation is a manageable legal matter, but an organizational signal that deserves a calibrated response, fair but firm discipline, public messaging that emphasizes accountability, and concrete steps to prevent recurrence. If the Browns handle it transparently and Garrett commits to demonstrable change, the story will fade. If it becomes a recurring theme, however, the cumulative cost, reputational, financial, and cultural, becomes material. Cleveland Browns star defensive end Myles Garrett was cited early Saturday morning for driving 100 miles per hour in a 60 miles per hour zone in Strongsville, Ohio, just south of the team's Berea facilities, league and local reports indicate. The stop occurred shortly after the team returned from Friday night's preseason game in Charlotte against the Carolina Panthers. Garrett was reportedly, presumably, on his way home. He received a $250 citation and, according to the report, can resolve the matter by paying the fine without a court appearance. The incident is the latest in a recurring pattern. This marks Garrett's 8th speeding citation in Cleveland since the Browns selected him number 1 overall in 2017. It also follows a well-publicized 2022 crash in which Garrett flipped his Porsche while reportedly swerving to avoid an animal. The timing and frequency of these traffic infractions raise obvious questions about personal conduct for a player who is both the public face of Cleveland's defense and one of the highest-paid non-quarterbacks in the league. Garrett remains under contract through a new 4-year extension signed in March that made him, at the time, the highest-paid non-quarterback in the NFL. The deal reportedly pays him north of $40 million per season, with over $123 million guaranteed, a commitment that elevates both his on-field value and the stakes of any off-field distractions. On the field last season, Garrett produced 47 tackles, 14 sacks, and a team-leading 22 tackles for loss, continuing a streak of double-digit sack seasons that has defined his career. The Browns acknowledged the citation and indicated the matter will be addressed internally during their upcoming trip to Philadelphia, where Cleveland plays the Eagles in their next preseason game. Teams typically weigh repeated traffic violations through a mix of internal discipline, counseling, and public relations strategy. Given Garrett's stature and the cumulative nature of